hybrid would be OSRD because you're getting some clarity on the open space, and then the more flexibility is in the PD side, right? But knowing that up front, I mean, because you're approving a bunch of uses that you have no idea how it's going to look with a conventional zoning.
With an OSRD or a PD?
No, with conventional zoning, say, OSRD, I'm not familiar with that, but just say it's, a commercial type zoning, you got a bunch of uses there. Or if it's a, mixed-use residential district, then, you've got all those uses without sort of design elements spelled out in it.
But that's what the IP was that we're talking about.
Yeah, so I think that, that maybe is a good placeholder to say you want that flexibility. I mean, if I'm speaking out of turn, let me know, but.
Jesse, do you know anything about OSRD IP, like as a zoning?
I haven't ever heard it referenced that way, but again, IP is
Innovative planning.
projects. Innovative projects.
And
So
then OSRD-M, which is
a lot of this is a
mixed
little bit of lexicon, right? So I mean, it's just a placeholder for, do you want more flexibility, or do you want conventional zoning?
And I think, like Priscilla talked about, I think we talked about the OSRD IP was just renaming our PD. It was still going to have the same pre-meetings and the same phase development type thing, the same approval. We were just renaming the PD or
Right,
the
open
OSRD.
space,
Yeah,
the open space.
yeah, the open space.
Why?
I know why, but it's just
Right,
got
because at some point, we have to educate ourselves. We've gotten to the point where evidently, the word PD, we're trying to skirt all around it. I mean, I'm just gonna be honest. We're trying to skirt all around it, when definitely, the PD is not what they've been saying out here that it is. A PD is one that's very restrictive, because what they're having you to do, you have to plan everything, bring that beforehand. This is not something that just happens. And so what we have to do is to educate people to understand what the PD is, and it's not what they've been saying it is.
But we don't know that.
Could I
because
ask Amber?
we don't have that information. So we don't, even in our own stuff, we gave parameters for open space, we gave parameters for everything else, but we didn't give it for PD. So we honestly, we don't know that. So a PD could be fine, but we need to define it.
I don't have a problem with that.
So do we need to not define it, but tell the zoning board that they need to define it?
Yes,
Right,
absolutely.
yeah, right. but
Later
we
in
have to
this
do
series of
that. Right.
recommendations, you will see several of them come back to PD and may respond to some of your interest in either making some recommendations concerning PD as it's in the draft UDO or alternatives to it.
Well, I just remember when Carrie got up one time, she was very frustrated trying to explain that PD meant planned development. That's what it meant, that's all it meant. It was planned and it was development.
No, that's not what it means from a developer standpoint. PDs are brought up for a reason. The reason why cities have PDs is so you don't have to follow regular strict zoning codes. It's totally that. It's totally open-ended and there are no guidelines. And the whole idea is for the developer to bring up anything he wants to do and then they judge everything on a case-by-case basis. That's what PD is for. OSRD is a little different. I mean, the whole thing, open space, that's exactly what it already defines your open space and puts parameters up there first that the PD is not going to have any parameters. So that's the difference between the two. That's why you can't really take the OSRD IP. It's not really a renaming of the PD because it still is quite different than a PD.
But so, all along, every time we've encountered PD in the discrepancies between comp plan and UDO, we have been putting in recommendations that say, make sure the PD has bike trails,
Yes.
make sure the
Make sure.
PD has
Absolutely.
open space requirements, make sure the PD has all of these things that the comp plan calls for. And so planned development, literally, as Carolyn said, it means
Plan.
smart growth, planning it out. But the one key difference that I understand, and I might be misunderstanding this, is that we get a better preview as a community of what the developer is thinking about before the zoning change. And that-
No, not before the zoning change.
That's the way I understand it.
Because there's no zone change. There's no zone change with the PD.
If someone's rezoning,
If someone rezones for a PD, you approve the zoning, and all the other stuff follows after.
that's not the way
That's not the way
I
I
understood it.
Yeah. John's right.
It depends on how you write it, and I think back to Andrew's point, it really depends on how much strengthening language, because if you don't put the strengthening language in there, it does provide that flexibility in process, and that's the point I was trying to make earlier, is that you've got that stuff all up front. It's not in a quasi-judicial decision-making process where you've got to make all those decisions that night in a combined effort. You've got it's kind of spelled out, and you can make it really vague, or you can make it very detailed. And you guys have put a lot of thought through this process, from what I can gather.
Jason, what
into-
you were
into
saying,
putting those points together.
putting in trails and requiring that stuff, it's really not a PD anymore if you do that. Because you're taking away the flexibility that a PD can have. Okay, so the thing you gotta understand, when we're looking at this stuff, we can change the UDO any way we want to have developers to have different things to require up front anyway. Okay, we were required to see more what the development looks like, which is different than what we do now. You know, right now we get the rezoning, then we see what it's gonna be afterwards. We can change it, and I've had a discussion with Kerry about that. Go ahead and let the developer show us up front what they wanna do
Yeah.
while they're getting that rezoning, so we see what it's gonna look like.
Yeah. So if we
Okay, it
can
makes the developer do a little
incorporate
bit more, you know, on the front end, but you're hoping with that, there'll be a better, relationship between the developer and the community to get more buy-in on a project like
that.
that.
Right.
Because people are very distrustful of something when you just get a blanket rezoning and you don't know what's gonna follow.
There's fairly, a common thread that I see in other jurisdictions' ordinances, and they often would call it a planned unit development zoning, that starts with the master plan of that developer proposer puts forth. The two travel, the map becomes the governing document that the planning board looks at. If it recommends it, it goes forward to town council. And so the map is as definitive as the town council, as the ordinance would call for in a PUD request. And then once it's approved, that master plan is locked down. It's phased. Oftentimes, municipalities have, 5 years later or 8 years later, they're on to phase 3 or 4, and something needs to be amended, and that re-raises the
That's
issue.
in a PD or OSRD?
Well, it's, other jurisdictions have things called a planned unit development. If I understand, excuse me, same thing. I think from, at least what I look at, what I look in the UDO and see PD, it looks a lot, it needs, and you brought this up over and over again, it's very vague, it is very wide open, and it is ill-defined. PUDs in other jurisdictions require a plan submitted with the request to pin down density and open space and height limits and setbacks and other dimensional limitations. But that's, I hear your frustration, and I've been frustrated looking at it because I tend to, there's very little on page 69 in the ordinance. It sounds like whatever recommendation you make, there's still a lot of work that will go before the zoning board as they.
Between here and the.
Oh, yeah, between your, whatever you put into your recommendation and how the zoning board takes it.
From a zoning standpoint, for rezoning, town ordinance requires very little. Sketch plan and environment inventory, and that's all. And once that's approved, we've got no leverage at all on what we want to do. Even though our ordinance say we're supposed to protect primary conservation areas as the first area to get open space, we're not, our legal opinion was we couldn't require that to be done.
Why do we have that in there?
Why couldn't we require that?
Well, I'm just telling you what what transpired on the Strader Road
Well,
rezoning?
It's not, we don't have any control over what primary conservation, like, we don't have any, like, this is what we think is important as primary conservation.
That's in our
space.
ordinance, what is supposed to be primary conservation.
But you can't pick and choose, like, this would be better for this property if this primary conservation space got chosen first. You can't pick and choose, that's the problem I find with the primary conservation space, is as long as it's in that list of primary conservation space, then if steep slopes meet the primary conservation space, then steep slopes is what you're gonna get for the primary conservation
But even if
space.
you don't have, even if you have steep slopes and the developer wants to, steep slopes is something about 15%. So if a developer wants to develop and put lots there, he can still do it, even though there's plenty of land that's purely flat.
Right, because he can pick some,
Yeah, he
open
can
space.
pick and choose where he wants to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Dick, would that be different between one tool versus the other tool? Or can we make the OSRD IP, you know?
I think that when we do a rezoning, we have to be more specific on what we want, what we're looking
And I
at
think
up
I
front.
think we brought that up earlier, saying that we need to look at our conservation areas and decide what's important and how to rank them.
So there is an existing recommendation on that.
How does Oak Ridge do
I'm not familiar.
Yeah, I mean, I can do some research.
Could I, good discussion, but could I pull you back to the,
Yeah.
to the language
Yeah,
of
we
this
got the first
recommendation?
comment, yeah.
So I just want to try derailing everything with the first comment.
Well, it's on everybody's,
Yeah, no, gotta bring it up.
I think one supplemental piece to that would be to see if Lily would do some infomercials for us.
So-
You know, all I'm saying is that the way
PSAs.
that I'm looking at regardless is that we can make the PD be what we want it to be. I mean, PD means planned development, so therefore what we can do is say that in the PD, we want this, we want that, because we don't have a definition of it. And so, since there is no definition, certain things are going out, that's not true. So therefore, what we need to do is define the PD, and we're doing that sort of as we're going along and saying, we want blah, 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 we want blah, blah, blah. And I think that that could work.
And that's your charge, right? It's to deliver that to the
Right.
planning board to
And we
say,
deliver that to the,
these
exactly, that's what I'm saying.
strengthened pieces are
Right.
needed for
and
this.
and I think later in this, in the recommendations that you made last time, you will see something that calls for more detail in PD.
Right.
So are there any changes that anybody would like to propose to the language you see there? And this one includes about 4 or 5 sub-recommendations, all working toward the aim of policy 6.1, which is to provide some provision.
I propose we put a hyphen after PD and a hyphen after OSRD. Just so we know we're saying PD type, OSRD type,
So a, like,
so that it kind of dispels that concern.
So you like,
Yeah.
Something like that.
well, it's.
No, I think you can make it more.
No, a PD type zoning and OSRD
Yeah.
type zoning.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
been a hyphen connected.
And elsewhere in this draft, I think you'll see that type of way of referring to it,
Yeah.
PD type. Permit a variety, a separate point, permit a variety of housing types in the OI and BN. Encourage assisted living facilities in appropriate districts. Density should be reviewed and determined based on the science of the particular site's land to include soils, groundwater recharge, and other elements from the comprehensive plan that affect capability.
And an updated water study.
That's the same.
That's what that refers to. Yeah, that means the science of,
Right, yeah.
Are you calling for something explicit, more explicit than that, or?
But it's not just the water study, it's innovation too,
I
right?
think that's it. I think it's, the water study is a big part, but I think there's always innovation, and that's what Millie was talking about.
Yeah.
Our cell phone tomorrow won't be the same as our cell phone today. Our water use tomorrow may not be how we use sewage, how we, whatever, all the septic, all of
And
that.
then, this is a qualifier, density for specific areas in a development should also be determined based on compatibility with surrounding land use.
That's where a land use plan would really be beneficial.
This particular sentence is looking at specifically within a development proposal, the, where different densities are allowed should be determined based on the compatibility of the soil.
Right, and this is the sentence that we worked on at the last meeting to account for all these different changes. Because we said we don't know these things when, now, so this is how we, this is the wording we used to try to accommodate that.
So how is the town, so the town council takes this, right? Or,
Well,
this
Zoning
Goes
Goes to the zoning.
Yeah. No. And then,
We actually don't know.
No, I mean, we don't want to write it, so Carrie would probably take this first, right? I'm assuming, Dick, you know, after the presentation, that some professional planner, and we do have one, we'll probably have to spend some time modifying UDO to take into account
As a matter
Oh,
of fact, I think she said that.
Yeah,
She is-
that's more than a 1-2 month thing, that's
Right,
a
yeah.
3, 4, or 5, I
Yes.
don't know, we're not sure how many months, but it'll take months to complete that.
Right. Well, I think they were talking about a consultant, maybe another consultant too, or something.
You know what, one thing I worry about that is I think we're in a position where we are because, you know, this was handed off to some consultants in the past and then pulled back by our planner, by a planner we had, and then it got changed again from whatever
Before
the
Carrie.
original thing was.
That was not Carrie, that was.
That was before Terry, pardon Terry. And so I don't know that I really want this to go to an outside consultant unless that person's very closely supervised by our planning staff who understands.
And that they're familiar with.
And understands what this whole process is, right? Gone through that, so I'd be a little concerned about that.
No,
Are you, any further comments or any recommendations for this recommendation?
I think Dick wanted to say something.
I was just gonna say that the zoning board is just like this group here, we're volunteer people. But we're on a longer term basis, and that we have not, we will not decide how to address the recommendations until after we have a presentation, and we'll discuss how best to do it. But I can assure you that we probably will give instructions to the planner to come forth with the language, that we're not gonna sit there and try and write the language for the ordinance. And how we go about reviewing it, it's gonna be a decision that's made by the zoning board, not by me. We'll probably ask input from you guys, how you think we should do it, and maybe from the town council. Who knows?
After we present it to you, we're done.
That's a good point. Maybe we'll have a public hearing and ask for how we should go about doing it.
Are you
But I'm
ready to
assuming
move to
all of
next
the changes
recommendation?
will then be public hearings and,
Oh, yeah.
It'll be all,
Yeah,
it'll be all public
legislation.
hearings.
We're required by law to have at least 2, the zoning board has to have 1, the council has to have 1. I can't imagine that 2's enough. It'll probably be multiples, and probably there'll be some Q&A session in there, so that the public can ask questions. Either, maybe 1 for both, I don't know.
Yeah, we're still a long ways off from making this resolve.
But we need to make sure that it's better, we vet this, in my mind, we have to vet it sufficiently with the public. Because I would really like to see a relatively high percentage of public acceptance. That's the goal, and I think that was always our goal, was to try and get more public input and then get a broader public acceptance.
education's gonna be key on all
Sure.
of these.
We're gonna tap your marketing skills.
Hey, once we present to the zoning board, we're done.
Are you ready to move to the next recommendation? This, add wording to include accessory and small attached housing in the intent statement for RS.
Yep.
Ready to move to the next?
Yes, so do we have, because we went through all these.
You did.
Yeah, we did.
And we made some changes, so maybe, the first one was a big one, right? I mean, we had to discuss that one. Do we need to read every one of these going forward?
For
or should people just-
efficiency's sake, if anybody wanted to, if you have your eyeballs on a recommendation that's on the screen and you want to discuss it, please raise your hand or let me know. So I think, and I can read them all, but it would be faster if going to the next.
Did we get to 6.4 last time?
Another one about ag tourism. We're still on 6.1. Let's scroll down to the green box below, okay? This one is another long one. Recognize the value of planned development type zoning to fulfill the policies of the comprehensive plan. Identify and describe this district with stronger language to regulate overall size, use, density, open space requirements, dimensions, and other standards. Encourage the inclusion of moderately priced housing in this district as stated in the policy. Run scenarios to anticipate the lot yield and price of resulting homes from various strategies such as those described in the comprehensive plan. That, just as commentary, that's not, that isn't for the UDO, that's for in development. Start with ideas and elements from the OSRD IP in Brentwood, Tennessee. This is Priscilla's suggestion. Consider a bonus based on the diversity of housing in a development. Focus on concepts of land use. Open space, excuse me. So that's sort of filling in a lot of the gist of what you are recommending for, or you're considering recommending to detail a PD type district.
I guess the hard part for that one is when you say encourage the inclusion of moderately priced housing in this district as stated in the policy. That's where the science is going to have to come into play on density, because you can't have the moderately priced housing if the density is where it is today.
I don't want to tease out any additions, but you've mentioned before science-based decisions, and does anybody want to add anything to this language?
Who are we asking to run scenarios?
That's the
Do
planner.
that, planning staff.
Part of the planning, just part of the planning process. I think it's just a sort of a
Placeholder.
placeholders to vote in there. It's part of the planning process.
Yeah, you're really, in this recommendation, I think you're giving a higher level recommendation to the zoning board, and then a next recommendation to the planner who's developing the language that would go into the UDO.
Yeah, there again, I agree with Andrew. Here you've got, if you're talking about density versus moderate priced housing versus water availability and so forth, there's got to be a balance there that recognizes every situation is going to be unique, and that none of those three, water or density or moderate price, should necessarily be more important than the others. And if you get into a situation where you're talking, I know some of the comments that the council struggled with in '99 was the fact that, if water is that critical, if the community really felt water was that critical, then why aren't we not looking at regulations concerning the washing of cars, sprinkling of lawns, and on and on and on. There are lots of things that can be done for conservation purposes, so it all has to be balanced. And none of those, I think, should be taking precedent over others. They should be balanced together.
Okay. Any suggestions for the language in this recommendation?
But, and part of that is, you can't do that under the current density, right?
No,
I mean, you can't do that.
no, and that's why the comp plan is recommending the providing for higher density,
Right.
but
To
being
allow
able
that.
to, yeah.
I think if I recall the language in the comprehensive plan, it says in content, generally in large developments.
Right, yes.
Any further discussion? You ready to move on from this recommendation?
I like that next one a lot.
Yeah.
Can we make that
That's a
like
good one.
a bright green?
I recommend approval of that one.
This one here?
That's technical. That one.
I thought you said the.
Can we make that font bigger and bold?
It looks like this has come up in, several you brought up in looking at policy 6.1, 6.2, 6.10, that suggests the adoption of land use plan.
Pretty straightforward.
Ready to move on? Let's see what this next.
And I'm skipping the wait.
Yeah, White is just responding to somebody's comment with an answer. This is about detached accessory housing. I think that was,
Back into.
yep. Okay. Ready to move on from that. This looking specifically at accessory housing. Remove the statement, the minimum lot size shall not be reduced below under any circumstances. Ready to move to the next?
Oh, because we have lots of.
Yes, yes. There's some existing lots and this one has to do with who makes the decision about minimum lot sizes. This would remove Guilford County from being the decider. The next, let's see. This calls for development standards for the other housing forms other than single-family attached or detached. Okay. The next one, the statement looks like that's an answer, but then it also, the recommendation part is allow additional lot coverage in districts for coverages in keeping with the appearance of the district. And move to the next. This I think you brought up earlier, but add an open space district back into the UDO. And if I read what that's saying is the OSRD that is now in the ordinance, retain it in the UDO. Some version. Ready to move to the next. This is very specific about the RS district. Do not include opportunities for a variety of housing types in the RS district.
I was confused by that. Didn't you have an opposite comment farther down related to RS?
A part of a right had to do with accessory housing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
one
think
did and
I
this
think we
one.
resolved it.
Okay.
That was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna put it back up.
Okay? Move to the next. This is in policy 6.3 that specifically is looking at accessory and also manufactured housing. It looks like the green create a more supportive solution for manufactured homes as principal and accessory housing types in appropriate districts. Ready to move on. This is under 6.4, green space development. Allow a variety of lot sizes in residential and other districts to accomplish this. Okay? Ready to move to the next. This looks like it came up in 6.4 and 6.10, 6.4. Allow and/or encourage community wells and sewage treatment systems based on factors particular to the property. Okay. Ready to move to the next. This spoken language to encourage green space development. The next, ready, include a maximum density and minimum open space and lot sizes in the intent statements for each zoning district. Ready to move to policy area 6.5. This has to do with open space requirements, apply open space requirements equitably, and allow for fees in lieu of land dedication for future open space acquisition. First recommendation, any suggested changes there?
I wrote a big question mark about, and wrote fee in lieu last week, and I don't remember why I did that. We talked about fee in lieu somewhere.
Probably because we don't have a policy yet written in here. Was that it? We
Yeah.
talked about it.
And
Because that's what we discussed.
And we had talked about that in the previous policy
Right,
too.
yeah, that's
There
probably
it
what it
needs to
was.
be defined.
But we defined the fee in lieu.
We had not defined the fee in lieu. It's mentioned, but there's no policy yet for the fee in lieu.
Do
It
we
has to
want
be
to
written.
put something in here that says something about that, or make a note of it here?
I think we should.
It's been
Almost
mentioned.
seems like it should be in the second piece.
Yeah, it's been mentioned.
For here?
It's been mentioned before, up here in 6.5.
Well, it probably fits most directly in 6.5
Right.
with the comp plan's second sentence specifically mentioning allowing for fee in lieu.
So in that
We've
second
mentioned
one-
it before, but it wouldn't hurt to mention it again.
Well,
I have it in my comment on 6.5.
Up a little bit.
So,
I think
on the
Carrie
open
thought-
space requirement right there, like it's in my comment, I wrote at the loopholes. Be in lieu of,
Yeah, because the under fives don't require fee in lieu. I think.
right.
Is that a form of recommendation?
Doesn't require open space either.
So what would you do?
Doesn't require open space either.
Should it be based upon
We just
development
need to
size or just
establish
in
the fee
general
in lieu
for us as a
policy.
recommendation?
Yeah,
Oh, I see what
Fee in lieu
you're
policy.
saying,
No,
no, it
I-
doesn't